Hey folks, Lars Harry here with a special bonus episode of the Courtroom podcast, and we've got a serious update in the ongoing Justin Baldoni versus Blake Lively situation. I know some of you thought this thing was winding down, maybe even fading into the background like so many Hollywood lawsuits do. But no. If anything, it looks like we're entering a new chapter, and possibly a more intense one. Word coming out now is that Baldoni and his team are preparing to appeal the dismissal in the New York Times case. And when I say appeal, I don't mean some symbolic gesture. I mean a full challenge to the ruling that basically shut the door on their claims. So if you were under the impression this saga was over, I don't think that's the case. Not even close. Now, before we even get into the legal mechanics of it all, I want to talk about why this moment feels bigger than just one lawsuit. Because that's what this has become. It's no longer just about two Hollywood figures arguing over a film, or press coverage, or alleged smear campaigns. This has turned into something cultural, and I think the reason is simple. People are tired. They're tired of feeling like big corporations, massive media outlets, and powerful celebrity circles can control narratives without consequences. They're tired of watching underdogs get steamrolled by institutions with unlimited resources. And whether you love Baldoni or not, whether you agree with him or not, a lot of people are seeing him as the guy standing up and saying, "No, I'm not done." That resonates right now. We live in a time where people feel railroaded by the machine. The machine can look like corporate media. It can look like talent agencies. It can look like publicists coordinating messaging behind the scenes. And in this specific situation, you have Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, two of the most powerful names in entertainment, on one side. And on the other side, you've got Baldoni, who many feel is fighting uphill. That dynamic alone is enough to turn this into a cultural moment. Now, I'm not pretending to be a legal scholar. You don't come to Coravanta for textbook law analysis. I'm just a guy sitting next to you at the bus stop giving you my take on what's happening. Sometimes I get it right. Sometimes I miss something. But I'm not bought. I'm not reading off a script someone handed me. I'll give you my honest opinion every time, and honestly, I think this appeal move is significant. According to sources circulating online, Baldoni's team intends to appeal the entire dismissal order and judgment. Not just a piece of it. The whole thing. And that matters because some creators have been saying, oh, they're just appealing the New York Times portion. But from what's being said, the ruling overlapped all parties. So if you challenge it, you're challenging the foundation of the dismissal itself. Now here's where it gets legally interesting. The argument for appeal reportedly centers on whether the federal court made an error in determining that Baldoni's side failed to properly allege actual malice. In defamation law, that phrase is huge. Especially when it involves media outlets. Because when you're dealing with the press, the protections are strong. Very strong, and for good reason. We need a press that can report without living in constant fear of being sued into silence. A free press is essential. I've personally defended press protections before when smaller creators were threatened legally for covering stories. You can't have a functioning society where journalists are terrified to publish, but here's the flip side. Press protection is not the same thing as immunity from accountability. If a media outlet knowingly coordinates with one side to frame a narrative, if they selectively publish information, if they receive drafts before official filings and help shape messaging, that crosses into murkier territory. And that's where Baldoni's side appears to be pointing. The dismissal, from what legal commentators are explaining, leaned heavily on litigation privilege, meaning statements made in connection with a filed complaint are protected. But Baldoni's team argues they weren't suing over the act of filing the complaint. They were alleging that coordination and leaking happened before any complaint was officially filed. That distinction matters, because if the alleged dissemination occurred before judicial proceedings began, the privilege might not apply in the same way. That's not me declaring it illegal, that's just the crux of what the appeal would likely argue, and this is why people are watching, because if Baldoni can even get the appeal heard seriously, it opens the door to discovery. And discovery means emails, metadata, communications. It means timelines. It means clarity. Now let's pump the brakes for a second. Some legal analysts are saying this announcement doesn't mean the appeal is already filed. It just means it's being considered. And that's fair. There's a difference between intention and execution. Courts move slowly. Processes matter, but here's the thing, Baldoni's team may not even be able to formally appeal until the judge rules on the request for attorney's fees. That's part of the chessboard right now. The New York Times is reportedly attempting to use the federal dismissal to secure attorney's fees under New York's anti-SLAPP statutes, essentially arguing that the claims lacked merit and therefore they deserve reimbursement. Baldoni's response? The judgment isn't final if appeal rights are still open. So relying on it as settled law may be premature. It's a procedural tug-of-war, and I'll be honest, most people don't care about the technicalities. What they care about is this: is he fighting back? And the answer appears to be yes. Now let's zoom out. Why does this story grip people the way it does? Because it taps into a broader frustration. We're in an era where trust in institutions is low. Media credibility is constantly debated. Celebrity power structures are scrutinized more than ever. And when you see someone challenge a narrative that feels polished and protected, people lean in. And add to that the behind-the-scenes drama from the film itself, the texts, the editing battles, the power plays, and suddenly this isn't just a lawsuit. It's a character study in ego, influence, and control. And speaking of that, we need to talk about the messages that have surfaced, because regardless of how you feel about either side, some of the texts attributed to Blake Lively raise eyebrows. Particularly the ones suggesting tension over editing control and production authority. Now, in Hollywood, hierarchy matters. Directors direct. Producers produce. Actors act. Of course there's collaboration. Of course stars have input. But when lines blur, conflict happens. And based on what's been shared publicly, there were disagreements about access to dailies, involvement in the editing room, and control over the final cut. From Lively's perspective, she may have felt sidelined. From Baldoni's perspective, he may have felt undermined. And when egos collide on a tight production schedule, it gets messy fast. Film sets are pressure cookers. Time is money. Every minute costs. When you're shooting multiple pages a day on a limited budget, you can't endlessly experiment. Decisions have to stick. Now imagine trying to hold creative authority while simultaneously navigating behind-the-scenes lobbying from outside voices, agents, celebrity friends, industry heavyweights. That's combustible, and some of the messages suggest exactly that kind of external involvement. Whether that ultimately matters legally is another question. But culturally? It adds fuel to the narrative of power imbalance. Here's what fascinates me though: despite everything, the movie didn't bomb. It performed well. Which means audiences connected with it regardless of the internal warfare. That's almost shocking when you consider how fractured the production allegedly was. Sometimes art survives chaos. Sometimes it collapses under it. This one survived. Now, stepping back into the legal angle, appeals are long shots. They're uphill battles. Courts don't casually overturn dismissals. Baldoni's team would need to show that the judge misapplied the law or misunderstood the claim. That's not easy, but it's not impossible either, and even the act of appealing changes perception. It signals resolve. It says, I'm not accepting this quietly. Right now, that energy resonates because beyond Hollywood, people feel like they don't get to challenge systems that dismiss them. So when someone publicly does it, especially against a legacy publication like the New York Times, it captures attention. Again, I'm not saying he'll win. I'm saying the fight itself is symbolic, and that's why this doesn't feel over. Now, I also want to acknowledge something important. This channel, Coravanta, covers commentary. I'm not breaking classified documents. I'm analyzing what's publicly available and giving perspective. And I know some of you don't come here for politics or global issues. But part of being honest with my audience is admitting when bigger things are happening in the world that weigh heavy. We're in a strange time globally. Conflicts escalating. Governments posturing. Narrative spinning at high speed. And in the middle of all of it, we're watching a Hollywood lawsuit play out in real time. It feels surreal sometimes, but here's my promise, we'll talk through it. The heavy stuff. The entertainment stuff. The uncomfortable stuff. Because pretending none of it exists doesn't help anyone right now though. In this specific case, the immediate takeaway is simple: Baldoni isn't done. The dismissal did not close the chapter. It may have triggered the next one. And if an appeal is filed, buckle up. Because that means more filings, more arguments, more public debate. We're not at the end of this train ride. Not yet. Welcome back, folks. Lars Harry here, picking up exactly where we left off. If you stuck around for part 1, you know the headlines. Justin Baldoni may appeal the New York Times dismissal. The behind-the-scenes film drama with Blake Lively is messy as ever, and the cultural stakes feel enormous. Now, let's dig deeper, because the story isn't just about legal filings. It's about human behavior, Hollywood power dynamics, and why people are captivated by an underdog taking a stand. First, let's talk about the psychology of the audience. Why do we care so much about this fight? Why are people following every move Baldoni makes? Honestly, it taps into something primal. People want to root for someone who fights back. Someone who refuses to be railroaded by power structures, corporations, or influential figures. There's satisfaction in watching an underdog assert themselves. We've seen it in sports, politics, business, now we're seeing it in Hollywood. And here's the thing, Baldoni, from the outside, looks like a classic underdog. He doesn't have the star power of Lively or Reynolds. He's not backed by every major media outlet. Yet he's stepping up and saying, I'm not done. I have rights. I have a voice. That's relatable. That's inspiring to many people who feel similarly pushed aside in their own lives, whether at work, in school, or in broader society. Now, layering onto this is the legal nuance. Appeals aren't just procedural. They're strategic. Filing an appeal signals intent, preserves options, and can shift negotiations. Even if Baldoni's team ultimately doesn't win, they're asserting their presence, protecting their arguments, and sending a message that they won't be silenced. That alone changes the landscape. It's a move that says, the story isn't over. And in our culture, the story often matters as much as the law itself. Switching gears slightly, let's revisit the production drama. The leaked messages from Blake Lively paint a picture of creative friction that's intense but not entirely unusual in Hollywood. Film sets are pressure cookers. Budgets are tight. Schedules are compressed. Every minute counts. In a high-stakes environment, decisions are made fast, and egos inevitably clash. But what makes this case more compelling is how personal the conflict appears. It's not just we disagreed on a line read. It's about influence, control, and perceived authority. And that is amplified by celebrity power dynamics. Take the texts alleging disputes over editing access. Baldoni, as director, has final say over the creative product. Lively, as a producer, at least in name, expected to have more input. That clash is almost archetypal in film: director versus star, vision versus influence, process versus ego. It's like watching chess in real time, with millions of spectators who get to speculate on every move. And let's be honest, Hollywood loves these stories because they humanize larger-than-life celebrities. They show that even people with massive influence are still navigating complex personal and professional dynamics. But here's the kicker: despite the tension, the film was successful. That's remarkable. Often, when creative visions collide and communication breaks down, projects suffer. They lose cohesion, the final product falters, and everyone points fingers. Yet here, even amid friction, the film resonated with audiences. That shows resilience, talent, and perhaps luck. It also reinforces the narrative of Baldoni as someone who can weather pressure, which feeds into the cultural fascination with him as the fighter. Let's pivot again, because there's a bigger picture beyond Hollywood. The Coravanta audience knows I touch on global issues, not just celebrity drama. And right now, while we're dissecting lawsuits and film disputes, the world outside is experiencing intense turbulence. Conflicts in the Middle East, escalating tensions in Iran, and the constant threat of geopolitical instability are realities that can't be ignored. And while these events may seem disconnected from a Hollywood lawsuit, the broader point is how power, influence, and accountability intersect everywhere, in media, politics, and international relations. The lesson here is striking: power matters, and how it's exercised has consequences. In Hollywood, mismanaged authority can lead to leaked texts, lawsuits, and reputational damage. On a global scale, mismanaged authority can lead to conflict, suffering, and human catastrophe. And in both cases, the public watches, interprets, and forms opinions, often before full facts are known. The dynamics are similar, just magnified on different scales. Returning to Baldoni, this is where the cultural moment intensifies. He's not just fighting a legal battle, he's challenging perception. He's pushing against systems and figures perceived as dominant, and in doing so, he becomes a symbol. People latch onto symbols because they distill complex events into something tangible. Baldoni, whether intentionally or not, has become a symbol of resistance, of asserting oneself when the odds seem stacked. And let's be clear, symbols are powerful. They drive narratives, shape public opinion, and even influence outcomes. That's why this story isn't just a legal curiosity. It's a reflection of how society consumes stories, evaluates justice, and roots for perceived fairness. Now, let's circle back to process and procedure because it's essential to understand what comes next. The appeal, if filed, will set off a series of legal events. The court will review filings, consider arguments, and decide if the dismissal stands or if certain claims deserve reconsideration. There may be new evidence, expert testimonies, and extensive discovery. This isn't a quick replay of the original case, it's a fresh opportunity to examine the details under scrutiny. And that's why observers are so interested. Every motion, every ruling, every argument could shift the narrative. And here's an interesting aspect: media perception. Every headline, social post, or commentary shapes public understanding, sometimes faster than courts can issue rulings. That means Baldoni's appeal isn't just legal, it's a public statement. It communicates persistence, resilience, and willingness to engage the system. Even the discussion about whether the appeal is merely considered or formally filed influences perception. That's the fascinating interplay between law, culture, and media today. Of course, there's also the humor and humanity in all of this. The behind-the-scenes anecdotes about film production, people scrambling over editing, disagreements over shots, and the inevitable chaos of collaborating with multiple strong personalities, those stories remind us that even celebrities navigate ordinary challenges. They highlight that conflict, miscommunication, and frustration are universal experiences, even if magnified under public scrutiny, and therein lies the second layer of fascination, the human element. Baldoni and Lively aren't just legal entities, they are humans navigating ambition, creativity, ego, and perception. We see glimpses of vulnerability, pride, irritation, and determination in their actions. That makes the story compelling not just for law junkies or film enthusiasts, but for anyone who's ever felt pushed aside, misunderstood, or challenged in their own work. Now, let's weave it together with a broader perspective. Baldoni's appeal, the text messages, the production anecdotes, the media coverage, they're all part of a larger narrative about power, influence, accountability, and cultural resonance. The legal battle is real, yes, but the symbolic weight is even more significant. People are rooting for someone who fights, questioning authority, and witnessing how narratives are shaped behind the scenes. And beyond that, there's an important lesson in resilience. Baldoni's persistence reflects a broader principle: showing up, asserting oneself, and pursuing justice, even when the odds seem daunting, can command attention, shape outcomes, and inspire others. It's a reminder that influence isn't solely about wealth, fame, or access, it's also about resolve, strategy, and clarity of purpose. Finally, let's acknowledge the emotional impact. Watching a complex situation unfold in real time, whether it's a lawsuit, film production drama, or global conflict, can be exhausting and overwhelming. But engaging with it critically, understanding the mechanics, and observing human behavior can provide insights far beyond the headlines. It teaches empathy, critical thinking, and patience, qualities often lost in quick social media soundbites. So where does that leave us? Baldoni's story is ongoing. The appeal could reshape the case. The behind-the-scenes drama highlights the tension between ambition and collaboration. And the public fascination underscores how culture, law, and media intersect in ways that captivate and challenge us. But the broader takeaway is that persistence, clarity, and willingness to challenge perceived injustice resonate, not just in Hollywood, but in life. And that's where Dive gave you the legal and procedural landscape. Part 2 explored the cultural psychology, the the human dynamics, and the larger implications. The Coravanta audience now has the full picture: what's happening, why it matters, and why it's worth watching. So, stay curious, stay critical, and stay engaged. Whether this appeal ultimately succeeds or fails, the ripple effects in public perception, cultural conversation, and the very idea of standing up to power will be significant. And that's what makes this story more than just a Hollywood lawsuit. It's a reflection of our times. Thanks for sticking around. I'm Lars Harry, and this is Coravanta. We'll keep watching, analyzing, and talking through it all, because these moments deserve our attention, reflection, and yes, even our debate. Stay tuned.